everywhere I played throughout my career, the Jewish community just gave me nothing but incredible support and love. I realized, not just playing, for the name on the back of my jersey, but I'm representing the Montreal Canadiens as an organization, obviously, my family. And as a Jew, I'm representing Judaism. And that certainly meant an awful lot to me. Being a role model in a community where there weren't, I think there are a lot more Jewish hockey players today, but there certainly weren't an awful lot back when I was coming into the league, and it meant an awful lot to be a role model in the community.
Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Hey Where'd You Go podcast. I'm your host, Collin Kushner. Joining me now is Stanley Cup champion, U.S. Hockey Hall of Famer, former NHL defenseman who also played for my beloved Red Wings, Mathieu Schneider. The first time you stepped on the ice, can you kind of take us back to that exact feeling? Was it instant, oh, I love this, or was there some hesitancy and you kind of had to ease your way into things?
Oh, in all honesty, I don't remember my first time on the ice other than my dad telling it over and over again. But it was at Rockefeller Center was the first time I actually skated. It was something that I just took to right away. I just really enjoyed it. I think the fact that you're always engaged in hockey, and I guess if I would compare it to baseball later on, when I was in high school, when I had to really pick between hockey or baseball, I was definitely more passionate about hockey just because you're involved and engaged all the time. Baseball, can be a lot slower.
I agree with you 100%. I think that was one of the reasons that drew me to hockey as well at a young age. Is like you're, especially on my end as a goalie, you have to be dialed. I mean, the moment you look up, and the same could be said for a forward or defenseman. If you're a goalie, the puck's going to go in the back of the net, and if you're a forward and you're looking down and you're looking around, you're going to get lit up. Um, so I totally understand that. I guess I know you said that your parents had gotten divorced at a young age. Was hockey, were you able to utilize that as a healthy distraction?
Absolutely. And I was in a very unique situation, I guess I would say, in that um, so my brother and I are the only two siblings in our family. And when we first moved to Rhode Island, I moved with my dad. My mom stayed in New Jersey with my brother. And that was for the better part of a year, I would say. But when we moved to Rhode Island, uh, and I went to Mount St. Charles Academy, which is a famous hockey school, certainly on the East Coast and probably a little bit in the Midwest as well. There are a lot of discussions of which which area in the U.S. had the best high school hockey for years. But we lived about a quarter mile from the rink, and the coach, Bill Belial, who was there for decades and ran an incredible program, allowed me to go on the ice. And he had a son that was about a year or two younger than me, and so I would just take my hockey bag, throw it over my shoulder in the summertime, and go down, skate for hours with the sun on the ice. There would be just the two of us. And then later on, when my brother moved up to Rhode Island, he would join us as well. And I was able to get a lot of ice time in that a lot of kids normally wouldn't get at that age. But it was really that was kind of like my upbringing. My dad worked an awful lot when we moved back to Rhode Island. We had a family business in the electrical industry and lighting that he worked at. And my brother and I were kind of left to our own devices an awful lot. But hockey became kind of that outlet for us, and it gave us the stability I think that we might not have had otherwise.
How important do you think it is, and I guess just for everyone, no matter what type of situation is going on at home, to have an outlet like a hockey or something like that?
I can't say enough or express enough how important I think that sports and or physical activity are in kids' lives, and I think something that's missing today. I know over the last decade, 2 decades, sometimes gym has been taken out of the school curriculums. Uh, it's I'd love to see more sports played in the high schools, in the schools, rather than in the private, AAA sector. I think that brings a lot of challenges. There's a lot of great that comes along with it, but there's a lot of challenges as well. And for me, I just had an incredible experience playing high school hockey and playing for and on a team that had a great program for years. And I know that's not the case everywhere in every school, but I do think that kids should definitely be involved in sport and activity. It teaches so many great life lessons as well.
You were drafted in the third round of the 1987 NHL entry draft, 44th overall by the Montreal Canadiens. Can you take us back to that exact moment, what it felt like to be drafted into the NHL and by one of the most prestigious franchises of all time?
Yeah, it was pretty remarkable. I think for me it was a dream. And if I flash back a year before then, I was at Mount St. Charles. I was in my junior year. I really I was really excited about my senior year, heading into the summer, and I had my sights really set on college. And I tell people this today all the time, and I think that people's, for another issue we deal with in sport today, I think every parent thinks their kid's going to play in the NHL or play in Major League Baseball, the NBA, and it puts an awful lot of pressure on kids. I never felt like I was going to play in the NHL, but it was a dream, and it was a far off dream that I never thought I'd be able to attain. I always thought college hockey and potentially getting a scholarship and playing in college would have been a great career for me, and I would have been very happy doing that. When I decided to leave high school a year early, and I went to Cornwall in Ontario and played major junior hockey in Canada, which I lost my college eligibility when I left to go play in Cornwall in the Ontario League. And and so a lot of people were very critical of that decision, particularly my dad, because I was 17. I don't think they necessarily felt that I was making the decision alone. And in all honesty, if I look back on that, um, I wish I had gone to college for various reasons. I really think I was so fortunate to have gotten drafted by Montreal because I was able to develop under such great coaches, and all their scouting staff were unbelievable. I learned so much, and I developed so much after I was drafted, and that was really I owe all that to the organization, because if I had come into another organization that just kind of let me figure things out on my own potentially. And I've seen a lot of guys that I came in with that were in and out of the league, in a couple of years, 2, 3, 4 years, floundering between the minor leagues and the NHL. I would not have been able to have the career that I had um, if I wasn't developed the way I was in that organization in Montreal. I owe so much to my career for the coaches I had and the scouts in that organization early on.
Do you think that feeling that you had of not thinking you would make it to the NHL, that you would go to college, have a great college career, do you think that ended up helping you in the long run, kind of when you look back, that mentality of like having it as something that you dreamt of doing, but you weren't sure it was actually going to become a possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I you read stories about like Earl Woods and Tiger Woods and the Williams sisters, things like that. That from birth they're being groomed, and it's maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's I never had that pressure on me as a kid that, okay, we're in this, or the family's moving from California to Michigan just to pursue my 8-year-old's hockey dreams. And I've run into that, and I've seen that so often over the last 15 years or so. And that's kind of just it's a symptom of the society that we live in. But in the end, I think that for me, it was just how things were at that time. And then if you look at how USA hockey has come along as well, I would say pre 1988, for argument's sake. I think the league was 90% Canadians, or 80% certainly, and it might have been a Canadian kid's dream more so than it was an American kid's dream. We had the 1980 Olympics, and then after that, you what happened in the mid to late 80s were guys like Pat LaFontaine, Tom Barrasso. You think of Brian Leach, Kevin Stevens, Mike Richter, and I knew these guys. I played with and against them, and in the New England area. Brian Leach was from Connecticut, but I always seemed to be playing with or against him at different points. He was a year older than me, but that kind of generation of players were the ones that really came in. Craig Janney, I think, coming right out of the '88 Olympics and jumping into the Boston Bruins lineup and scoring huge goals, and those kind of those players, that group, really, I think, smashed a hole in the ceiling to open the door for the next generation to follow. And that was, guys like myself, Mike Modano, um, Jeremy Roenick, and then I think, coming just behind our kind of class, you had guys like Billy Guerin, Doug Waite, and there's just some really great players that were kind of all around that time. We ended up in the '96 World Cup altogether, but certainly not the depth of Canada. But that was kind of like, okay, we're breaking through the ceiling here. You can play college hockey and be a successful NHL player as well, which there was always that knock that college players were soft. They didn't have fighting in college, and junior hockey was a lot closer to the NHL style of play at the time. All of that's changed since then.
You won a Stanley Cup early on in your career with Montreal in 1993. What was that experience like, and how did it shape your approach to the rest of your career?
I was 23 when we won in Montreal, and I thought I'd win it 10 more times. It's just at the time, I joke with people today about it. I feel like I was so young, I almost took it for granted. And the work and the effort and the luck that it takes to get there every year, stay injury free. Everybody, all 20 guys playing at the highest level from goaltending on out. Your role players, you're playing hurt. Guys are coming in and out of the lineup, substitute, and everybody has to be on, and that's for 2 months. You got 4 rounds, 2 months, and so you develop a bond with those guys that you win with. And so all of those things meant an awful lot. Didn't realize it, didn't appreciate it probably until a couple of years later in my career. But winning it in Montreal was just an incredible feeling. And at the time, they were criticizing us for the previous two seasons. It was the longest time the Canadians had gone without winning the Stanley Cup. So they had won it. They won it in '87, or was it '86? I think it was '86 that they won, and so it was the longest time they had gone without winning a cup there. And we read about it in the paper every month, so another reporter would bring it up. So it was an interesting time there, but if I only had to win one, which I did, Montreal was the place to do it.
You played in the NHL for 21 seasons, playing for 10 different teams. I kind of want to talk about longevity in the National Hockey League and then just longevity in professional sports. I mean, that's unheard of nowadays. How were you able to be so productive for so long? I think that's the one thing I've always wondered about your career.
Well, I think part of it was I think when if I go back to my upbringing and my hockey development, my dad really focused on skills when I was very young. I think at a time when it wasn't necessarily the case, across the board. There were guys that weren't great skaters, great puck handlers that were playing in the NHL. And when I got to the NHL, I think if I had to say what my two or three biggest strengths were, it was really my skating, puck handling, ability to move the puck, get the puck out of my end, and it was at a time when the NHL was really big. It was big and heavy. They had, I think I was probably one of the smallest defensemen that was taken in the draft, the year that I was drafted, and I think my size was also part of the reason why I was drafted, uh, 44th that year rather than higher up. There are a lot of defensemen in that draft that were 6'2", 6'3", 210, 220 pounds, that were really skilled as well. But I think that kind of carried me throughout my career, in all honesty. Just the ability. And then as the rules changed, they changed into my favor. So there was a lot less interference, hooking and holding, fighting. Obviously, I wasn't a great fighter, so there are things like that that really played in my favor and allowed me. And then I had a couple of injuries that kept me out for large parts of the season, but I never had anything that I wasn't able to overcome. I had a couple of sports hernia surgeries. I had a couple of shoulder surgeries, but my knees were generally good throughout my career. My hips stayed pretty good throughout my career, and those are big issues for guys, over the course of their career. And even though I wasn't injury free, I was able to play most of my career, without missing, like a full season or or even full playoffs, things like that.
You scored 223 goals, tallying 744 total points over the course of your career. Internally, Matthew, like mind, body, and soul, like what led to that level of production and consistency?
Uh, I think it was, if I go back to Montreal and the coaching staff that was there, my shot became a big part of my of me as a player over the years, and in particular my one timer. And so that on the power play, and now today every player's got a great one timer, and they get pucks off quickly. The release is great, but Jacques Leperrier was our defensive coach, and probably every other practice we'd be spending a half hour after practice, and Jacques would take us and he'd work with us in the corners playing defense. He'd work with us at the blue line, one timers, and we'd be staying out on the ice an extra half hour, 40 minutes every day, working on those things. And my shot really got better when I got into the NHL. I didn't have a big heavy slap shot in junior or in high school even. I more of a playmaker, dishing the puck off left to right, on the power play in particular. But the shot, the shot in the end, I think, and being able to get pucks on the net and through traffic, probably why I was able to uh, score as much as I did and get uh, get the numbers that I did.
What was it like watching, Pavel Datsyuk get to work? Because I know my brother and I, like, I mean, when he was playing, he was probably, we always thought he was the best player in the NHL, just from a pure skill perspective. What was it like for you seeing that every day?
He was on another level from anyone that I really ever saw or played with. I think of maybe a guy like Alex Kovalev. Kovalev was, I'd say, the same skill level, but he didn't until later in his career when he played with Mario in Pittsburgh and Robert Lang in Pittsburgh, another guy that came through Detroit. Um, he didn't distribute the puck the way Pavel did. Pavel was just another level altogether, and just seeing the complete package of uh, just how strong he was on his skates, the way he could move away from a defender, the way he protected the puck and just kind of slid, and then I think the thing that really captivated the fans early on was his shootout goals, and he could just embarrass a goalie. That would be my biggest fear. Pavel Datsyuk coming down, like just embarrass you. I like freeze guys, pull them out of the net. It's the stuff that he was able to do, and that led to a lot of other players trying to emulate a lot of his moves. But he was just something certainly special.
I'm really excited to kind of dive into your Judaism, Matthew. I mean, some might say you're the greatest Jewish hockey player of all time. How has your Jewish identity influenced your life, both on and off the ice throughout your NHL career?
Well, I would first of all, I would say between the Hughes brothers and Foxy in in New York, these guys are incredible players. And 1 year, all of a sudden, I'm not the or 2 years, two Norris trophies. All of a sudden, I dropped way down the totem pole of Jewish defenseman all time wise. But um, we were never a strictly religious family, but my dad raised my brother and I to be very proud of our Judaism, and it was something that I think when I was again, I go back to Montreal, and Montreal has an incredibly strong Jewish community, and they embraced me from day one. It was awesome, and I think playing in that community, and then Long Island, obviously, and then even back in Toronto, everywhere I played throughout my career, the Jewish community just gave me nothing but incredible support and love, and it was really in Montreal when you start to sometimes when you're young, you're a little bit selfish, and you're trying to figure things out. Um, you know, I realized, not just playing, for the name on the back of my jersey, but I'm representing the Montreal Canadiens as an organization, obviously, my family, and as a Jew, I'm representing Judaism, and that's certainly meant an awful lot to me, being a role model in a community where there weren't, and I think there are a lot more Jewish hockey players today, but there certainly weren't an awful lot back when I was coming into the league, and it meant an awful lot to be a role model in the community.
I just want to personally thank you because in our household growing up, you were definitely a role model, for me as a young Jewish kid, as a hockey player. I mean, there weren't many Jewish guys in the NHL. So when my dad told me like, "Hey, Mathieu Schneider, like he's also Jewish," I just remember there was that connectivity point. Like I don't know if I can really explain it or how to explain it, but it was always nice to know, like growing up, like, hey, there is somebody else like you. They're playing at the highest level, and it there was like a sense of comfort that came with that. So just segueing away from the questions, I just wanted to personally thank you, for that because that meant a lot as a kid growing up, and you're still trying to figure out things. It was nice to have that.
Oh, thank you for that. And I absolutely understand what you're talking about that connection. And I think, you know, but not to get off topic, but I think I imagine you feel similar that I do. We're thinking about Israel and the situation going on there, and we're dealing with anti-Semitism uh, creeping into into an ugly world. But it's and you feel that every time you see things happen, whether it's on college campuses or overseas, you feel that connectivity. I absolutely understand what you're talking about. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. And to your point, yes. I mean, anti-Semitism is running rampant globally now, and it's definitely, something that is felt obviously throughout the Jewish community. Did you ever face any anti-Semitism throughout your NHL career, Matthew?
Well, there were a couple of instances, remarks made to me on the ice. For the most part, I really just chalked them up to guys being naive. I don't. I always like to believe, or I like to think that they weren't anti-Semitic. They were just trying to get under my skin and gamesmanship, but I don't think people always understand um, the words that they're using and saying. So, but I would say 99% of my career was unmarred, and even the couple of guys that did say things over the years, I was able to talk to them at different points later on my career. So I never felt that there was any kind of prejudice against me.
I do think you bring up a good point. There is a lack of education, and I do think that leads to some of the remarks being said. But I guess I'm 33 years old now. I guess in my head, if you don't know something or you don't understand something, don't say anything. And on the side, maybe ask somebody who's knowledgeable on that particular subject to then teach you. I don't. I think that's just my older brain kind of jumping in, being like, why jump to these conclusions? If you don't know something, don't say it.
Yeah, and it's funny. I think I say it to my kids all the time. They'll probably uh, they'll be embarrassed by me saying it again. My one of my most used sayings over the last 10 years has been the thing about common sense is it's not so common. And we talked a little bit earlier about social media and what it's done to this generation. I think it becomes very difficult for young people in particular to know what's true, what's not true. I know we talk about misinformation. I think misinformation is maybe sometimes an overused word
I would agree.
to kind of paint everything similarly. I think I think it's up to people to really try try to understand both sides of an issue, to try to get as much information as they can, good solid information. And a lot of times you're hearing people's opinions, and people's opinions most of the time aren't necessarily fact. But I'm 100% with you, Colin. And if you don't fully understand something, if you don't know the situation, I've never been over to the Middle East. I've only been able to read about it. I have a lot of friends that have kids over there, that have relatives over in Israel. I try to learn as much as I can from them. I have friends that are pro Netanyahu, that are anti Netanyahu. So it's just, but at the end of the day, I do have a lot of opinions on the topic, and I try to talk to people that I know have more knowledge than I do, and and they're always developing. But the one thing that I know for certain is what we've seen as far as the anti-Semitism, whether it's in North America on college campuses or overseas in the Middle East, it's unacceptable. And I think we all feel like we're in this fight together. And I know a majority of the people that I talk to are in agreement with that.
What do you think it means for Jewish athletes to have representation in the NHL today? And how do you think it's evolved since your playing days?
Well, I think it's just incredible watching the young stars that we have today. Obviously, I mentioned the Hughes brothers, and I'm friendly. I'm friendly with the mom and dad. I've known them. They're closer to my age than the kids, but I've gotten to know the kids a little bit. Really great people. Adam Fox, just incredible person, young man. Going to be great players for years and years in this league. So I am very hopeful and optimistic that it's going to inspire the next wave generation of young Jewish hockey players. And uh, as you mentioned, I do think it's important that kids have role models like that to look up to. It certainly gives them the inspiration and the feeling that, hey, I can do that as well. So it's a very exciting time. There's no question about it. And I'm very proud when I watch those guys play.
You joined the NHLPA after your playing career concluded as an executive for nearly 13 years. Um, you're advocating for players' rights post retirement. What are some of the biggest issues players face today that may have been overlooked during your NHL career?
I think when fans look at professional athletes, they think everybody's playing 10, 15 years, everybody's making millions and millions of dollars. Which I mean, there are guys that do that, but the average career in the NHL, I think, is still under 5 years. You go to the NFL, I think it's 3 years. I'm not sure what it is in baseball, basketball, but the average career lengths of players coming through are not always what they seem to fans. You're looking at the superstars, you're looking at the Tom Brady's, you're looking at the Pavel Datsyuks and the Henrik Zetterbergs, and um, so it was important, particularly under Don Fear when Don came in from baseball. He was another great Jewish leader. Don came in from baseball. The pension was a priority for him, and we have now in the NHL um, uh, the highest level of pension that you can have in the U.S. And Canada as well. And if you play 5 years in the NHL, when you turn 62, you're going to have a pretty decent pension when you retire. And so that was a big priority for us, no question, something that we're very proud of being able to attain in collective bargaining. Healthcare was another one, trying to make sure that we had affordable healthcare for players once they retired was a priority, and we were able to achieve that in the last collective bargaining agreement as well. When I think of where the average salary has gone over the years, it continues to grow. Hasn't necessarily kept pace with the other sports, but there are probably a whole host of reasons that we could get into that, take up another show. But I think generally, if you're an NHL player today, there's an awful lot that you can count on, um, knowing that there's going to be something there for you, not only while you're in the NHL, but later on in life when you're uh, retired from hockey, but also when you're retired and receiving Social Security as well.
Do you think all of your years as a player helped you bring a fresh perspective once you became an executive and joining the NHLPA?
Oh, there's no question, and I think when I look at one of the pluses of playing on 10 teams in the NHL. I used to say this all the time. I saw the good, the bad, and the ugly. I played in organizations like the Montreal Canadiens, New York Rangers, and Detroit Red Wings. But I also played for the New York Islanders when they were in turmoil. The ownership group was not settled. Similarly, in Toronto, when I got there, I think the teachers' pension had the biggest share of the team at the time, and it just creates an environment that is very challenging for management, for players alike when you're in an organization that has that kind of turmoil. So I pretty much saw everything over the course of my career. Anything that's in the collective bargaining agreement probably happened to me over the course of my career. So I think living it, living through the agreement and understanding it certainly helped when I retired. There's no question about that.
When you reflect back on your playing career, do you feel fulfilled today?
I do. I do. I sometimes joke that I feel like I played one or 2 years too many. That but when that's your entire life, you go as long as you can. And so I try not to live life with any regrets. And I look back and I think would it have been great to play one team and play 21 years? Absolutely. Well, I'm sure it would have been amazing. But that wasn't in the cards for me. And I thoroughly enjoyed and took so much out of each city and each team that I played for. And I'm eternally grateful for the game and just want to try to give back to it as much as I can.
Mathieu Schneider, everybody, appreciate the time, appreciate the conversation. And again, thank you for being such an incredible influence, for myself and I'm sure plenty of other Jewish hockey players growing up.
Thanks, Colin. I really appreciate that. Look forward to meeting you in person one day.